You ever reach that moment when you realize someone isn't just being annoying, they're declaring war? Yeah, that was me the morning I found splinters where my mailbox used to be. The sun wasn't even up when I stepped outside my rental on Pinecrest Lane, still wearing yesterday's jeans and a t-shirt that smelled faintly like diesel from a late-night repair job. My coffee mug slipped from my hand the moment I saw the mess. The thing shattered on the driveway, ceramic exploding like a miniature grenade. My handcrafted walnut mailbox, modeled after the one my grandfather built when I was a kid, was gone, completely obliterated. All that remained were ragged pieces scattered across the wet asphalt like nature had spit out the leftovers. And then I saw her, backing out of her driveway across the street. Nadine Farrow. Her spotless silver SUV gleamed like it just rolled off the showroom floor except for the fresh dent along the bumper. The same height as a mailbox post. The same length as mine. My pulse tasted metallic, bitter, like biting down on aluminum foil. She saw me staring and didn't even flinch, just tossed her sunglasses on, lifted her chin, and drove away with that smugness you only see in people who have never been punched by consequences. In that moment, I knew something. She wanted a fight. She was getting one. But before I tell you how I ended up building the mailbox that haunted her dreams, let me rewind. My name's Elias Rowan, 49, newly separated, recovering from a life that had way too many moving boxes and not enough peace. After leaving my job as a structural engineer for highway projects, I moved to Ridgewood Estates, hoping for a quiet reset. The house I rented wasn't fancy, single-story, old brick chimney, yard full of potential, but it felt like a place I could breathe again, or so I thought. Here's what no one bothered to tell me. Ridgewood Estates wasn't just a subdivision. It was a kingdom. A perfectly trimmed, rule-heavy, paint-color-restricted kingdom ruled by the Ridgewood Community Board, established 1992. And sitting at the head of that throne was Nadine, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood excellence. Picture this: blonde hair stiff enough to deflect minor weather systems, yoga clothes that had never touched a gym mat, and a smile so tight it could cut glass. She wasn't just on the board, she was the board. Treasurer for 8 straight years, unchallenged, untouchable, and apparently bored enough to turn my life into her personal hobby. And the worst part, that smashed mailbox was just the opening move. What came next proved she wasn't after my mailbox. She was after me. If I thought the destroyed mailbox was the peak of Nadine's insanity, the next 48 hours proved I'd underestimated her. Badly. I spent that morning sweeping splintered wood into a pile, trying to breathe through the frustration. My neighbor across the street, Martin Hale, a retired paramedic with a beard big enough to hide small wildlife, wandered over holding 2 mugs of fresh coffee. "Rough start?" he asked, handing me one. "You could say that." His eyes drifted to the dent in Nadine's SUV. He didn't have to say a word, we both knew. Martin wasn't a gossip, but he wasn't blind either. He'd lived in Ridgewood Estates for 23 years, long enough to know every crack in the sidewalk and every crack in Nadine's personality. He leaned closer. "She's had complaints filed against her before. People just stop fighting because it's easier." "Yeah," I muttered. "I'm not most people." He chuckled. "That's what I figured." Before heading back inside, he added, careful, "She knows the board rules better than she knows her husband's birthday." I didn't take it seriously then. I should have. By noon, the first envelope appeared on my doorstep. A glossy, perfectly typed notice bearing the board's crest, a tiny oak leaf stamped in gold. The letter accused me of environmental negligence for allowing yard debris to remain visible for more than 30 minutes. The debris? My smashed mailbox, still lying on the sidewalk while I figured out what to do with it. I stared at the paper in disbelief. 30 minutes? Who monitors debris on a stopwatch? But then I saw the signature. Nadine Farrow, board treasurer, the same signature that would haunt me for the next few months. I didn't even have time to stew before a second letter arrived late that afternoon, delivered by a teenager on a bike who clearly wanted no part in whatever madness was unfolding. This time, the accusation was failure to maintain aesthetic harmony, which, apparently, meant my temporary plastic mailbox, the one the post office gives you after vandalism, wasn't sufficiently compatible with the neighborhood's architectural character. It was a gray plastic box, not a flaming dumpster. That night, I sat on my porch watching the streetlights flicker, running every possible scenario through my head. I wasn't the type to let someone roll over me, especially not someone who weaponized community guidelines like she was preparing for court. What I didn't realize was that Nadine already saw me as the enemy. This wasn't random. This wasn't personal inconvenience. This was a crusade, and she just declared it officially. But if Nadine thought I was going to fold under a few warnings and scare tactics, she clearly had no idea who she'd picked a fight with. The moment I decided to fight back wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost too quiet. And sometimes silence is the clearest warning that a storm is about to hit. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store, determined to rebuild my mailbox, not just replace it. If Nadine wanted a problem, I'd give her something she'd need binoculars to complain about. I bought cedar planks, a post anchor, wood stain, and a hand-carved metal plate I found on clearance. The old man at the counter raised an eyebrow when he saw the cart. Building a fortress? He joked, something like that. When I got home, I noticed something odd. Nadine's SUV parked perfectly straight, as if she'd spent 10 minutes lining it up with a ruler. She was outside trimming a bush that didn't need trimming, glancing my way every few seconds like a hawk pretending it wasn't hunting. I didn't acknowledge her. I just got to work. For hours, I cut, sanded, stained, and assembled the new mailbox. It wasn't fancy, it was art. Stronger than the last one, taller, set deeper into the ground. The kind of mailbox that could survive a minor earthquake. Martin wandered over again when he saw me leveling the post. That thing could support a telephone pole, he said. That's the idea. He laughed, then lowered his voice. Word is Nadine's planning to file something big at the next board meeting. You might want to show up. Good, I replied. I was planning on it anyway. That evening, as the stain dried, I noticed Nadine walking her dog, a tiny fluffball that looked terrified of her. She stopped in front of my house, stared at the mailbox, and pulled out her phone. She took pictures, lots of pictures. I waved. She didn't wave back. Inside, I wrote a polite but firm letter requesting documentation for the complaints she'd filed. I included a time-stamped photo of the broken mailbox and another of the temporary one. Nothing dramatic, just facts she couldn't twist. But somewhere deep down, I knew facts weren't her problem. Control was. When I dropped the letter into my freshly mounted mailbox, the cedar still warm from sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt since moving here. Resolve, maybe even purpose. I wasn't trying to stir drama, but I wasn't going to be pushed out of a house I'd barely settled into. Not by someone who operated like a dictator with a gardening hobby. The board meeting was in 2 days, and I had no idea what she was planning. But the moment I stepped into that meeting, I realized Nadine wasn't just preparing complaints. She was building a case against me. A serious one. The board meeting wasn't supposed to feel like a courtroom, but the second I walked through those double doors, it was clear Nadine had turned it into one. The community center smelled like old coffee and lemon-scented floor polish. Folding chairs were arranged in stiff rows, and a long table stood at the front where the board members sat. 5 of them, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Except Nadine. She sat in the middle seat, hands folded neatly on top of a thick binder. Not just any binder, this thing looked like it could survive a fall off a skyscraper. Bright red, labeled with a gold sticker, Rowan Compliance File. My stomach clenched. She'd made a file, not for the mailbox, for me. Martin gave me a small nod from the back row where he sat with a few other longtime residents. Some wore polite smiles, others looked worried. A couple just looked ready for the entertainment. The meeting started with normal business, budget updates, landscaping notes, pool maintenance schedules. But Nadine wasn't paying attention. She was staring at me like a cat watching a mouse choose which trap to step into. Finally, she cleared her throat. "There is one last item of concern," she said, sliding the binder forward. "Household on Pinecrest Lane. Rental property, currently occupied by Elias Rowan." Every head turned. She continued, "This resident has displayed repeated disregard for neighborhood standards, resulting in multiple violations in less than 24 hours. A murmur went through the room. I stood. "If you're referring to the mailbox you destroyed," her smile tightened. "Accusations without evidence are inappropriate in this setting." Evidence? There was a dent in her bumper the size of my grief. I took a breath. "I'd like to present documentation of my own." I handed the board members copies of the letter I'd prepared, including time-stamped photos and a statement explaining what actually happened. As they read, I watched their expressions shift, first confusion, then discomfort, then a glance toward Nadine that said, "We didn't sign up for this." One of the board members, a man named Gerald Knox, cleared his throat. "Nadine, why wasn't this information included in your report?" She bristled. "It wasn't relevant." Another member frowned. "It's entirely relevant." For the first time, Nadine's confidence wavered, only slightly but enough. I leaned forward. "All I want is to live here peacefully. But if I'm going to receive 5 notices in a single day with no investigation, I think that deserves an explanation." The room went silent. You could feel the shift, like a wind pushing back against someone who'd always assumed it blew in their favor. And then Nadine's expression hardened. She wasn't backing down, she was doubling down. And I didn't realize it yet, but her next move wouldn't come through the board, it would come straight to my front door. Some people fight fair, some fight dirty. Nadine? She fought with a level of creativity that would have impressed a Bond villain. The morning after the board meeting, I walked outside expecting silence, maybe even a small break from the madness. Instead, I stepped into something squishy. A mound of wet mulch sat dumped across my driveway, fresh, steaming slightly in the cool air. Not enough to bury a car, but definitely enough to ruin my mood and stain my shoes. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds, processing. Mulch, in my driveway, who wakes up and does that? Before I could grab a shovel, I heard the click of a phone camera. Across the street, Nadine stood at the edge of her lawn, holding her phone sideways like she was filming a nature documentary on the emotional decline of a middle-aged man. "You might want to clean that up quickly," she called out. "Debris violations escalate after 1 hour." My jaw clenched. "You really need a hobby." "Oh, I have one," she said with a sweet smile. "Neighborhood improvement." Martin emerged from his garage, muttering, "This woman needs a nap." He brought over 2 shovels without being asked. As we started clearing the mulch, he whispered, "This is intimidation. She's testing how far she can push you. I've noticed." He smirked. "Good, because the others have noticed too." "The others, people on this street. No one likes her. They're waiting to see if you fold or fight." Fold? Not happening. By the time the driveway was clear, I'd made a decision. I walked across the street to Nadine, who pretended she didn't see me approaching, despite literally staring at me through her sunglasses. "You going to explain the mulch?" I asked. She flipped a page on her clipboard. Maintenance error, I'm sure. Accidents happen. The irony nearly knocked me over. I took a slow breath. I'm requesting mediation through the board, formal mediation. Her smile cracked just a bit. Mediation meant she couldn't harass me without oversight. Everything would have to be documented, and the board would be forced to be present. For someone who relied on private whispers and intimidation, that was the last thing she wanted. Her voice sharpened. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." "No," I said, "I'm making it fair." She turned on her heel and walked away, steps clipped and fast. That's when Martin whistled low. "You just poked the hornet's nest." "I know," I replied. But what I didn't know was how fast the hornets were going to swarm. Because before I even filed the mediation paperwork, Nadine launched her boldest attack yet, and it hit harder than all the others combined. There's a specific kind of dread that hits your stomach when you realize someone isn't just causing trouble. They're plotting. And Nadine's plot arrived taped to my front door. That afternoon, I came home from a supply run to find an official-looking envelope stuck crookedly to the doorframe. Not placed in the mailbox, not slipped under the mat. Taped dead center, like she wanted to make sure I saw it the second I stepped inside. I peeled it off, already bracing myself. Inside was a letter titled, "Emergency Compliance Intervention Notice," not a real board document. I knew that instantly. The formatting was wrong, the crest was skewed, and the wording, pure Nadine. She accused me of creating a hostile atmosphere, engaging in confrontational behaviors, and my favorite, knowingly constructing a structure intended to provoke. The structure, my mailbox. My wooden, completely legal cedar mailbox. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. At the bottom was a threat. Failure to address these issues within 24 hours could result in temporary suspension of community privileges. Suspension of privileges in a neighborhood. Martin saw me reading it and jogged over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Oh no, what's she done now?" I handed him the paper. He read it once, then twice, then let out a deep sigh. "This isn't even official," he muttered. "She typed this herself. Gerald's been on the board for 8 years. They don't even use this template." That meant she'd gone rogue again. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You are being watched for repeated violations. Please maintain appropriate behavior." No signature, no board ID, just a threat. I showed it to Martin. His expression darkened. "That's a burner number." She used one last year during the fencing dispute with the Millers. "Is this normal for her?" I asked. "Normal? No, frequent." Unfortunately, I took a slow breath. I'm filing something stronger than mediation. What? An official complaint with the city housing liaison. Martin blinked. "That's serious." She escalated. "I'm escalating." He gave a small, proud nod. "Good, someone needs to," but Nadine wasn't done, not by a long shot. Later that night, when the sun dipped behind the houses and the streetlights flickered on, I stepped outside to lock my truck. That's when I saw her silhouette on her porch, arms crossed, watching. No phone in her hand, no clipboard. Just staring, as if waiting, as if daring me to make the next move. But she didn't wait for me, she made the next move herself. And it was the one that pulled the whole neighborhood into our war. You know a situation has hit a breaking point when people who normally avoid conflict start showing up at your door with questions they're afraid to ask out loud. The next morning, I woke up to something unusual. Voices. Not raised, not arguing. Whispering. Several of them. I pulled back the curtain and saw 3 neighbors gathered on the sidewalk near my driveway, talking in hushed tones like they were planning a secret mission. When I stepped outside, they turned quickly. A woman with dark curls introduced herself first. "I'm Lacey. I live 2 streets over. We heard about the notices." Another man pushing a stroller added, "She's done this before." "You're not the first." Martin finally joined the group, coffee in hand, nodding. Told you people were watching. I forced a small smile. Well, watching is one thing. Getting dragged into this is another. Lacey exchanged a glance with the man beside her. We're already involved, she whispered. She sent us letters last year for having mismatched patio chairs. A guy with a paint-stained hoodie stepped forward. And she tried to find me for my truck being too visible from the road. This wasn't a handful of isolated issues. This was a pattern, a long one. We've all been hoping someone would stand up to her, Lacey said softly. You're the only one who hasn't backed down. Well, I replied, she's not exactly making it easy to ignore. Before we could continue, a loud honk echoed down the street. A delivery truck pulled up in front of Nadine's house. The driver unloaded 3 large boxes labeled security equipment, high resolution. Lacey's eyes widened. Oh no, tell me she didn't. But she had. Less than an hour later, brand new cameras appeared around her property, front, back, angled toward the sidewalk, and one positioned so perfectly toward my driveway it may as well have had my name etched onto it. She stood on her lawn supervising the installation, hands clasped behind her back like she was overseeing a military operation. I walked to the edge of my yard. You planning to film a documentary over there? Her lips curled. Just ensuring community safety. Some residents are unpredictable. I nearly laughed. If you want to accuse me of something, try doing it honestly. Oh, don't worry, she said quietly. I intend to. The neighbors behind me shifted uncomfortably. They had seen enough. Lacey leaned close. You really should file that complaint with the liaison. We'll back you. That surprised me, support I didn't expect from people I barely knew. But they were fed up, just like me. And that's exactly why Nadine's next move wasn't just aimed at me. It was designed to send a message to everyone who dared stand beside me. Some battles are loud. Others arrive quietly, wrapped in envelopes that look official enough to scare a whole neighborhood into silence. Nadine chose the quiet kind, and she sent them everywhere. By mid-afternoon, my street looked like mail carrier central. A volunteer courier, one of those teens who deliver neighborhood newsletters, was riding around on his bike with a stack of cream-colored envelopes. Every house he passed got one. Every mailbox got one. And each time he slipped another letter inside, my stomach tightened. Martin intercepted one before his even hit the slot. He ripped it open and marched across the street, waving it like something on fire. You're not going to like this, he said, handing it to me. The header read, Community Advisory Regarding Disruptive Resident Behavior. Disruptive, that was the word she chose. The letter suggested, without ever naming me directly, that a male renter on Pinecrest Lane was causing instability, conflict, and potential risk. It urged residents to remain vigilant and report any concerning activity to the board immediately. It was fear-mongering packaged in professional formatting, and Nadine had delivered it to every doorstep within 4 blocks. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. She's trying to isolate me. Not just you, Martin said. She's trying to scare people away from supporting you. As if on cue, a neighbor I barely knew, older man, baseball cap, stiff posture, walked by quickly and avoided eye contact. His wife followed, clutching the advisory like it was a court summons. This is how she wins, Martin muttered, not with rules, with rumors. But the real hit came 20 minutes later. A soft knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, a little girl stood on the porch holding another envelope. Her mother waited on the sidewalk, face red with embarrassment. She said I had to deliver it, the girl whispered. I knelt and smiled gently. Thank you. This isn't your fault. The mother mouthed, I'm sorry, before hurrying her away. Inside the envelope, a personalized version of the advisory. This one did name me. It accused me of ongoing hostility, noncompliance, and creating an unsafe atmosphere for families. It looked official, but it wasn't stamped. Wasn't signed by the board, just Nadine. I paced the living room, adrenaline pounding through my arms. This is harassment, full-on harassment. Martin, standing by the window, nodded. Then it's time to treat it like harassment. I grabbed my phone, snapped photos of everything, and started documenting every detail. The letters, the cameras, the mulch, the notices. If she wanted a war of paperwork, I could fight that war too. But Nadine wasn't banking on paperwork. She was banking on humiliation. And the moment she realized her scare tactics weren't working, she escalated in a way none of us saw coming, one that would bring chaos right to my driveway. There's a fine line between manipulation and madness, and that line snapped the moment sirens echoed down our street. It was early evening, the kind where the sky glows orange and the air smells like someone somewhere is burning dinner. I was out front repairing a loose hinge on my mailbox when I heard the unmistakable sound of police radios. Two patrol cars turned onto Pinecrest Lane, lights flashing, engines humming low. They weren't speeding. They weren't urgent. They were purposeful, like they already knew exactly where they were going, straight toward me. Neighbors emerged instantly. Doors opened. Curtains shifted. Kids stopped riding bikes mid-pedal. The entire street seemed to hold a collective breath. The first officer stepped out, tall, calm, practiced. The second stayed by the car, watching the crowd. "Are you Elias Rowan?" the officer asked. "Yes," I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. "We received a report of a disturbance involving aggressive behavior at this location." My chest tightened. "From who?" "We can't disclose that," he said, which told me everything I needed to know. Nadine stood on her driveway, arms folded, wearing the most dramatic expression of concerned innocence I'd ever seen. Her dog sat beside her, trembling like even it was embarrassed. The officer continued. "The caller claimed you made threats toward members of the neighborhood board." My eyes nearly rolled out of my skull. "Threats? I haven't threatened anyone. I asked for mediation, that's it." Martin hurried over, hands raised. "Officers, he hasn't threatened anybody. We were outside all afternoon. The only disturbance was mulch." A few other neighbors stepped closer, not aggressively, just united. Lacey, the paint-stained hoodie guy, even the older couple with the stroller. Their presence mattered. The officer glanced at the group, then back at me. "We're just here to make sure everyone's safe. Can you tell us your side?" I explained everything, calmly, clearly, no dramatics. The notices, the fake letters, the cameras, the advisory she sent around. As I spoke, I watched the officer's expression shift from neutral to mildly irritated, not with me. When I finished, he nodded. "Nothing you've described sounds criminal, but filing a false report, that's another matter." You could practically hear Nadine's heart skip. She stepped forward. I only reported what I believed was happening." The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, if you knowingly exaggerate or falsify information, that's an abuse of emergency services." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. He handed me a pamphlet. "If this continues, document everything and file a harassment report. You have that right." The officers left slowly, deliberately, letting their words hang heavy in the air. And for the first time, Nadine looked genuinely unsure of herself. She retreated into her house without a single snarky comment. Martin exhaled. "Well, that backfired on her." "Yeah," I said, "but she's not finished. She won't quit until she gets the reaction she wants." I was right. Because that reaction finally came, but not the way she expected. The next move didn't come from her. It came from the entire neighborhood. Sometimes the biggest turning point isn't loud or dramatic. It's a quiet moment when people finally decide they've had enough. And that moment arrived sooner than Nadine ever expected. The day after the police showed up, Pinecrest Lane felt different. Not tense, not fearful, different. Neighbors walked slower, people talked more openly. It was like everyone had silently agreed to stop pretending Nadine's behavior was normal. So when the emergency HOA meeting was announced, called not by Nadine, but by the board itself, the entire neighborhood showed up. Even people I'd never seen before. The community center buzzed with whispered conversations as residents filled every seat. I took a spot near the middle. Martin sat beside me with a grin that said he'd been waiting for this moment since the early 2000s. The board members entered together, all 5 of them, and the room fell silent. Nadine followed behind them, clutching her infamous red binder like it was a life jacket. But for the first time, she didn't walk with that confident, chin-high stride. She looked rattled. Gerald, the senior board member, cleared his throat. Tonight's meeting has been called to address concerns raised by multiple residents regarding the conduct of our treasurer, Miss Farrow. The murmurs started immediately. Nadine sat rigid, jaw clenched. Gerald continued, "We have received reports of misuse of authority, improper documentation, unauthorized neighborhood advisories, and questionable calls to emergency services." Every eye in the room turned toward her. He added, "Several residents have submitted written statements." Lacey stood up. She sent scare letters to half the neighborhood. Paint Hoodie Guy said she's been bullying people for years. Another voice chimed in, "I was fine because my doormat clashed with seasonal Dacre." Then Martin raised his hand. She targeted Elia's, and we all saw it. Dozens of heads nodded. Dozens of voices agreed. Nadine's face drained of color. Finally, Gerald set down a stack of papers. "Given the volume of concerns and evidence provided, the board has voted to remove Miss Farrow from her position effective immediately." A wave of relief swept through the room. Nadine stood abruptly. "You can't do this. I am this board." "No," Gerald said calmly, "you were." She stormed out, binder in hand, refusing to look at anyone. When the doors slammed behind her, the room exhaled as one. After the meeting, neighbors came up to me, thanking me, shaking my hand, apologizing for not speaking up sooner. It felt surreal. I didn't start this to be some neighborhood hero. I just wanted peace. On my walk home, I passed the pool. Families were out, kids laughing. For the first time, Pinecrest Lane felt like a community, not a battlefield. Martin clapped me on the back. "Looks like you made this place better, whether you meant to or not." Maybe I did. Or maybe everyone just needed someone to push back first. And if you enjoyed this wild journey through HOAs, neighbors, and unexpected victories, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.